So right in this circle, this place called Colombo, is where Ouspensky visited during his magnetic center days. Because just like today, apparently also 100, actually more than 100 years ago, this would have been early 1900s, 1910. Ouspensky, driven by a magnetic center in search of the miraculous, went to India, sensing that the truth or the miraculous or schools, as he called it in his book, might be found there, definitely not in Russia, where he came from. And here he is, the young Ouspensky, dressed as an explorer, looking for the miraculous. Of course, he wouldn't find it. And he wrote this after meeting Gurdjieff. He said, I felt that I would rather have met him, meaning Gurdjieff, not in Moscow, but in one of those places from which I had so recently returned, in the court of one of the Cairo mosques, in one of the ruined cities of Ceylon, or in one of the South Indian temples. It is very typical, especially for the fourth way. You go somewhere far to discover it. You come back home, and there is a certain transition, a certain acceptance you need to make. Well, I wish this was Cairo here, but it isn't. It's just my boring home. And there you find your Gurdjieff or the book or somebody in the most unassuming circumstances. You somehow need to overcome, to transcend magnetic center expectation and realize this is actually what you were looking for. That's how it was for Ouspensky. It certainly was like that for me. I think it probably was like that for many of you. Some of you have actually mentioned this to me. As we know, Ouspensky would get very deeply involved with Gurdjieff's teaching for the next few years. They would break up, which is for reasons secondary for our exposition today. And Ouspensky would try his best to teach the knowledge that Ouspensky gave him and help others apply it, mostly in England. But somewhere in the 1930s, he is recorded to have said the following. Something is missing in the system, he says. If man is meant to remember himself, there must have been some simple, natural method. But it's been lost. I could never find it. Once in India, I heard an echo of such a method. The ancient Indian culture is very diverse, as I said, looking at the map. We will be drawing extensively from Hinduism. We will be touching upon Buddhism a great deal. And we will also be drawing from a tradition called Jain that somehow it is very extensive in India, but you don't see it throughout the rest of the world. These are three branches of the same tree. In fact, today they are known as religion. Yes, one person would consider himself a Hindu, another lady may consider herself a Jain follower. And of course, Buddhism, we all know, it's become popular lately in the West. But the term religion is very recent. 500 years ago, a person following the tenets of Hinduism would not necessarily have told you, I follow the Hindu religion. Buddhism was not a religion, neither was Jain. They were ways of life. They were outlooks of life, of the world, of the universe and our place in it. Being human, we can never really satisfy ourselves merely with a biological existence. The meaning of life cannot only be to get food and not die and procreate like it is for animals. And so you had these different ways of life offered in different regions all around the world, of course, not just in India. And in this case, they all stem from the same trunk. It means practically that in the roots of this trunk are certain very deep similarities that we will use And that once we tap into these similarities, we can actually freely move from Hinduism through Buddhism to Jainism without contradicting ourselves because they come from the same source. According to Hindu cosmology, gods and demons represent two poles of existence. I will pause here. This is already different than Judeo-Christianity, than good and bad. Gods and demons are necessary. Take out either one or the other, and you encounter trouble. So they represent two poles of existence. Both are active in the world, and a constant struggle is carried between them. In the normal course of events, they're evenly matched in equilibrium. At times, however, evil gains the upper hand, threatening this equilibrium or dharma, duty, obligation that is custom tailored to me, different from each of you, with an aim to find an inner meaning. We have to use all the resources we can. There are a lot of resources still in existence, a lot of texts, a lot of temple and art still exist, although usually in deteriorated state. But if we have people still alive, still somehow in touch with remnants of that tradition, then all the better. We use all we can. We will see a quotation related to this. Gurdjieff was no different when he was looking back, searching for truth back in his days, a generation before Ouspensky. And so Dharma, a law, both cosmic and personal, a duty and obligation, the support without which the orderly universe falls into chaos. But they're still in the Hindu world. We have Brahma, who is the creator god. We have Vishnu, which will probably be the focus of this week, who is the sustainer god. And we have Shiva, who is the destroyer. These roles are kind of archetypal. These different three play different roles in different myths. One of the beauties, by the way, of Hinduism is how unformatory, unstructured it is. Somebody can be this now, but then he or she can play an opposite role in a different myth. So you will have to allow a certain flexibility. But you see here very clearly the law of three. And he says, whenever the Dharma declines, there's that word. Whenever the Dharma declines, whenever that sense of the connection to my personal obligation, the connection to that cosmic law declines, then, and the personal purpose of life is forgotten, then I, Vishnu, manifest myself on earth. I am born in every age to protect the good, to destroy evil, and to re-establish Dharma. For a god to be born, in order to re-establish Dharma, he needs to incarnate, right? A god is not physical, not human like you or I. And so this can only be done through incarnations. And, typically there are 10 such instances, or 10 archetypal instances, where Vishnu has done this, because each of them carries a very detailed story, a whole myth, really, of what happened, first of all, to throw Dharma off balance, and then which incarnation Vishnu chose, and how, through usually a very epic story, that restoration of Dharma happened. These are different scenes from 9, actually, of the 10 of the incarnations of Vishnu. To keep these things from becoming like religious or comparative religion studies, to keep them from becoming academic, we have to tie them to the very fundamental effort of this teaching, which is self-remembering. This is how Gurdjieff conveys it. He says, when you become aware not only of what you are doing, but also of yourself doing it, you see both I and the here of I am here. This is self-remembering. We're going to have to keep relating everything to self-remembering. because it's an effort we can and should be doing always and everywhere. And so we have this anchor. You see what I mean? If we're speaking about the Mahabharata, if we're speaking about Dharma, if we're speaking about anything from Jain or Buddhism, we have to keep relating it to self-remembering, and that way we stay safe. We know that we're not just discussing interesting things and feeding our intellectual curiosity, but are actually trying to make our self-remembering more intelligent. Without form, how can God be meditated upon? Let's take God now to mean Reali, that homecoming that Rahil was speaking of. Just for the sake of this quotation, we're not. It's sufficient. But how can you meditate? How could Rahil be focused for 10 minutes without some kind of a form? How could Alina use her time well in this interval, in this intermission, without some kind of an aim, of a structure? How could Eva not just eat mechanically, but retain God, retain self-remembering without some kind of a structure? So this Hindu text is saying, without a structure, how can you remember yourself? Where will the mind fix itself? Remember Rahil's mind wanted to run forward. Probably if a self calls on me, I can say this. It's the other side of the coin. We have a mind that can think of later. It can handle abstractions, but the downside is that it handles abstractions even when it doesn't need to. As Rahil said, I don't need to think about that now. But not having the aim, Rahil would most likely have flowed with it into what we call daydreaming. Without a form, how will we restrain? Without a structure, how will we restrain daydreaming? When there is nothing for the mind to attach itself to, it will slip away from meditation or will glide into a state of slumber. Therefore, the wise will meditate on some form. He says, let us set up, for an example, a lotus pond. Also something from the landscape, of course, of India, yes? Not all of us have lotus ponds, surely not you, Krista, or at least I wouldn't think they survive your winter. Many countries don't. India does, has a lot of swamps and mud and ponds and these beautiful lotus that sometimes you see. So he gives this as an example. He draws, of course, from his natural landscape. Take as an example a lotus pond with much water, mud, and lotus plants. In this lotus pond, there are many wonderful blossoms, and right in the middle, a large lotus with the most wonderful blossom. This image of a lotus, we should pause to consider, because you see it very frequently in Indian, not just Hindu, Indian art. Here's Mahavira. Notice that his head seems to be coming out of the flower of a lotus. Here is Vishnu. Remember, I told you to become familiar with the blue-skinned four-armed deity. So we know he's Vishnu with his consort. They are sitting on a lotus. Just to give two examples, remember when I showed you his 10 incarnations earlier on, which is a series of 10 bronze sculptures, notice that they are all coming out of lotus flowers. They're like lotus blossoms, each one blossoming a little differently, all 10. The lotus pond is the world, explains Mahavira. When we speak of world, by the way, esoterically, it's always our cosmos. Okay? The world of Rahil, or of Catherine, or of Susanna, or Asaf. This world, this cosmos. So the whole pond is this cosmos, and it contains many things. It contains a lot of mud, which are the passions. For now, we can call them the functions. We will be more specific as the days unfold. The many lotus plants are the subjects, those impulses or eyes that are compatible with government, and the one beautiful lotus in the middle is the king, the governor. We mentioned form, Without a form, how can one meditate upon God? The definition of form is formulate, of the verb of form, is to express in a precise form, to state definitely or systematically. Formulation is spectacularly close, almost synonymous with incarnation. The verb to incarnate is to put into or represent in a concrete form as an idea. The same applies in our work. Vishnu has to keep incarnating, keep finding optimal forms in order to restore Dharma. From Ouspensky. For every definite aim, there is a corresponding effort. If you catch yourself using a wrong effort, it means it is a wrong triad. So we will adopt this attitude that there is always a right effort, we just have to find it. To create this energetic state. From the Katha Upanishads, we're back in Hinduism, but you see, it doesn't matter. We're swimming in this Indian world of Indian culture and drawing all these jewels and information from it. Look at this. By making the body the lower piece of wood and the syllable Om, the upper piece. Okay, so you have to envision a picture here, two pieces of wood. I'm trying to use them to ignite fire, friction between them. By taking one of them, the body, to be one piece of wood, the body, in here we would mean the general inertia of the body, the laziness, the mechanicality of the body. By using it as the lower piece of wood and the syllable Om as the upper piece, through the practice of the friction of meditation, we perceive the luminous self. And this self is exactly what Rahil mentioned, that homecoming, that yes, I'm back. It's me, real I'm remembering myself. We're going to be using friction, but in a methodical way. The body, or if you like, our mechanicality is always one part, the denying force. And we're going to use a syllable. We won't be using Om. Om is the Sanskrit term. But already we're starting to see some of that simple method that Ouspensky spoke of that exists. Yes, they had a method here. They had a system, a science. It's not something unfamiliar to you, of course. But in this context, you see how it is a certain knowledge that takes time. Well, various things actually to come by. It's not that simple to come by. There is a mantra that is called the jewel of the lotus. Apparently, it literally means jewel of the lotus. And it's Om Mani Padme Om. And here is what the texts say about this 6-syllable mantra. Notice, by the way, I broke it down into syllables. It's made of 6 syllables. This is an important distinction. And this is what it says. This mantra is the central essence. It is like the essence of rice, the staple food, of course, in the East. We take it home and fill our pots with rice. And then we dry it, and when it is dried, we pound it with a pestle to remove the chaff. What is the essence? The essence is the rice. In that way, all other yogas are like husks. And from among all yogas, all practices, all teachings, all texts, this 6-syllable queen of mantra is like the essence. Okay, there must have been some simple method, said Ouspensky. I felt I came close, he said, but I didn't quite get it. Well, here it is, or at least in one form. It's not the only mantra that exists, of course, not even the only 6-syllable mantra that exists. But here it is, in their own words, This 6-syllable queen of mantras is like the essence. We will be building a mantra or some kind of an effort around it, but we cannot repeat it just mechanically. Saying Om Mani Padme Hum won't get us anywhere as long as we don't know why we're saying it. What does it mean? We have not formulated, you see, we've not incarnated meaning into it. This is the hallmark of religion. We keep the form, but we lose the meaning. We are going to actually adapt the form and revive the meaning of this 6-syllable mantra and see if it answers, if it proves to be the simple, natural method that Ouspensky thought should exist, but that has been lost.